Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
The talk is given by Sylvia Boorstein, who's a highly regarded, widely known spiritual leader, author. I went to the Berkeley Library just yesterday and found she's in wide circulation. A couple of books here. Pay Attention, for goodness sake, Practicing the Perfections of the Heart, the Buddhist Path to Kindness. And this is just a sampling of many that you've authored and co-authored. The other one that I took out of it, you don't look Buddhist. So the full title is That's Funny, You Don't Look Buddhist, on being a faithful Jew and a passionate Buddhist. So without further ado, Sylvia, it's yours.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. I really wanted to give that instruction before we started because I wanted to talk about what I think about a lot these days, where my own practice thinking has really gravitated to, which is really in terms of the Eightfold Path, it would be, if I had to say this would be a talk about wise effort, really about actively cultivating particular mind states. So I want to start by telling you that I spent yesterday in another interfaith Buddhist context. I was a speaker at a conference on Buddhism sponsored by Dominican University for Marin County, and the speakers were all representatives of different lineages of Buddhism. I was the only representative of the Theravada tradition. And it was a very interesting day, and I loved it. I loved everybody's presentation. Everybody was sitting, the speakers were all, as they often are, sitting in the front row. And I watched, everybody had a notebook out, and everybody was taking notes on the other speakers, what the speeches. First of all, because you want to be able to say, as so-and-so said, and picking up on what so-and-so said. Also, people said very good things. They told very good stories. And someone said, we're all here getting each other's material, so we can go somewhere else. And partly that's true. I actually heard some people use other people's materials, more or less right. It was really interesting how material moves around. But anyway, there were two pieces of material that I wanted to share with you, because they were the piece of material that I wrote down. And the first one was from the Zen tradition. So I see there are Zen things here. How many people here are practitioners of Zen primarily? So the person who was giving this particular introduction to Zen was talking about the emphasis in Zen on cultivating composure in the mind, that making steadiness in the mind is of primary importance. And the analogy that they used about creating steadiness in the mind, they said, if your house was suddenly on fire, you wouldn't want to have hysterical firefighters arrive. And I just thought that was such a good analogy. Is that good? I read that right down. because it says the whole thing. Because the truth is that our house is always suddenly on fire. From one moment to the next, there's a new crisis that comes up, and you don't want to have hysterical firefighters arrive on the scene. You want the people who can make good decisions about what to do next. I have to figure out how to say, if I was saying it in a mindfulness tradition, I would say mindfulness is the possibility of seeing through the momentary crises that arise, that there is, if I pay attention, some place of clarity behind it or in front of it from which I can make a good decision about what to do. So it's a little bit of a nuance one way or the other, but I think we're all really saying the same thing. I'll tell you the one other piece of story that I copied down from someone else which also spoke to where I am in my own life, in my own practice these days. Someone told about an interview that they had read about an interchange between Stephen Hawking and somebody else. So you all know who Stephen Hawking is, a person who's quite compromised physically and speaks through a computer attached to his wheelchair. And someone asked, he's very limited, he can't speak, his motion is very limited. Someone said, "Are you a happy man?" And he typed out in his computer, "I am a happy man." And the interviewer said, I'm sure in a honorable, polite way, why do you think you're a happy man? And he said, typed back, "I'm intensely curious." And I just love that. Now think about it. I'm intensely curious. For me, it means, for me in myself is alive the ability to look beyond myself and really connect in wonder, in investigation. The world remains important to me. I like that. Because one of the things that I am thinking about more than anything these days is that what keeps me alive and going and interested and excited and wanting to get out of bed the next day in spite of the news and in spite of the politics and in spite of all the problems that face the planet and in spite of all the problems and fires in my family is the fact that I have warm connections with my life, with the people in it. I like to think about practice as the ability to not stay warmly connected, because I think when I'm challenged, I fall into self-centered concern. I think we all do. The mind is either warmly connected and pleasurably not alone in the world, or it falls in on itself and implodes in a kind of self-centered self-preoccupation. And I want to stay connected, and I am startled into self-preoccupation all the time. And I think about my practice not as staying in a place of clarity and connection, but returning to it faster and faster and faster. So I think about practice as really the continual return to warm connection. So I'll tell you the story. Probably you know that I like to tell stories, or some of you will know that. Some of you will soon hear that. And every once in a while, something happens that's a great story to tell. So this is a great story. This is the greatest story of the whole of 2006, I think. This is 2006 great story. It's not a year old. I'll have to abandon it in March because it's a year. I have to get a new story. But I know it was March of last year, and I was in the Denver airport going back and forth. You know how you go through the security and you're going through cordoned off lanes, back and forth, pulling my little carry-on bag with me. And I'm traveling alone, coming back to San Francisco. And you're walking along, and there are people behind you, people in front of you, and I become privy to a conversation of two people clearly traveling together right behind me. And the conversation, I'm minding my business, but you know how you hear people. It's sort of I become privy to a conversation behind me. The conversation goes like this: "It's your fault." The first voice says. Second voice says, "What do you mean it's my fault?" First voice says, "That's what I mean. It's your fault. It's your fault we're late." And the second voice says, "Prove it to me." "Well, you have to prove that to me." So what do you mean it's my fault? Back, forth. So I look around as if you're making as if that I'm looking to somewhere in the back of the airport, but actually to see who's here. So I peek around behind me. I see two people in sort of casual dress, carrying something that identified them as going on a sporting vacation, either golf clubs or tennis rackets or something rather. But clearly, they're youngish people traveling together on their way to have a vacation, and they're messing it up before they even start by this skirmish in the airport. So I stand there, I turn back around, and it's like a ping pong, your fault, your fault, your fault, your fault. So I have this tremendous urge to turn around and say to them, "Listen to me." It doesn't matter whose fault it is. Either you'll get on this plane or you won't. If you don't get on this plane, there will be other planes after this. And you don't know anyway if this is the plane that's going to have engine trouble and the one after it is the one that's going to land safely. You don't know anything at all. But I don't say anything. Truth to tell, the reason I didn't say anything is because I thought I could have gotten away with it. I was doing it in a nice way. I thought I could get away with it. I didn't do it because I had a momentary flash of these two people arriving at their destination sometime later and telling the story. You can't believe this wacky little woman in the airport. And I did not want to be part of their story. So I continue on. And I push my stuff through the screening device. And you have to get all undressed in the airport. Everything comes off, and the shoes, and open the suitcase and turn on the computer, everything. Push it all through. And then immediately on the other side, you have to hurriedly get redressed, stand on one foot, the other foot, put on the shoes, zip up this, put on the coat, close the computer. So it's like you're rushing to get redressed. And right in front of me is another couple. Also just made it through the security ahead of me. And they're also getting redressed, and they stop, and they give each other a hug, just like this, in the middle of getting redressed. It's like a gesture of affection. It wasn't an intense gesture, but it was anyway a gesture of affection, just like that, while getting redressed. So I had another thought, that I'm going to turn to the people behind me, and I'm going to say, you should look at the people in front of me, that we are all facing a challenge here. There are two ways to face challenges. Either you can embrace them and take them as challenges that you lovingly and warmly meet, or you can get upset and fight about it. So this has been the best story because I think it's a paradigmatic story. I think it happens to all of us. I am clear that I cannot say this used to happen to me when I was young and unwise. It could happen to me this afternoon when I am old and relatively wiser, because if I got startled, I would do the same thing now. The mind gets confused, it gets upset, it doesn't know what to do with itself, and it does something maladroit, something that doesn't work well. So I think to myself, I love that story, because it's a really, it serves, that's the airport version of the story, but it could really happen for any kind of a challenge in our life, happening all the time. So I want to relate it to a Buddhist story, so this becomes really a legitimate Dharma talk. Because it is really the legitimate paradigmatic Dharma talk. On the night of the Buddha's enlightenment, this was another thing that everybody talked about yesterday. All these different lineages, they have different canons and different scripture and different stories about how Buddhism moved and what really was the real Dharma. But everybody has as their central story the enlightenment of Siddhartha Gautama under the Bo tree that led to the dissemination of Dharma as truth across all of Asia, and then into this century, last century, into Europe and into the Western Hemisphere. And here we are now. So everybody told in some way referred to that enlightenment experience. And what I like very much, it isn't here, but you've probably seen it, is the depiction, the illustration of the Buddha sitting poised and equanimous under the Bo tree, assailed by the forces of Mara. And the forces of Mara in the traditional illustrations are personified. Mara's a demon, and demons come along, the warriors of Mara come along. I think of that as being a metaphor for all of the forces of confusion that arrive to seduce the mind out of clarity and into confusion. So here's Mara, and here's the Buddha sitting resolute, and here's Mara, and you see the forces of Mara throwing spears and arrows at the Buddha, and here's the Buddha so exuding equanimity that radiates out, according to the explanations in the scripture, radiates out, inner equanimity that radiates out as such loving kindness that when those spears and arrows approach anywhere near the Buddha, they are turned as if he's shielded by an invisible shield. They're transformed into flowers and they fall on the ground all around him. And they are beautiful. They're in all the children's Buddhist picture books, coloring books, because they're great pictures to color. After all the fearful images that arrive, the spears and the arrows, all the erotic images arrive, because there are two ways in which the mind can get easily caught in confusion. And one is when it gets angry and frightened and wants to push away. And the other is things that seduce it, erotic images. And the Buddha is again poised. And those also dissolve in the field of his great and impermeable equanimity and benevolence. So I think, actually, I very much am moved by that story. I hope you are, because it actually is the central focus of how I think about my practice. I wish I could dwell in such impermeable equanimity. It's not so. Sometimes when I go places far away from the Bay Area, people don't know me so well. Maybe they know I write the books. So, someone in the best of intentions in an audience will ask the question, how is it to feel peace of mind all the time? So you all laugh, you don't even know me, but I say as graciously as I can, I wish I knew. And I say, I'm just a couple of words away from the most sublime mind state dissolving into completely nothing. If anyone that I care about calls me, if I pick up the phone and someone says, hello, Sylvia, and it doesn't sound good, and it's somebody that I know and love, I could have been in the most sublime state. Hello, Sylvia, I'm in trouble. Gone. And really, the whole world disappears at that moment. And me and the person that I care about are the whole world at that moment. And how to keep my mind, how not to have that happen. I wouldn't have it otherwise. I wouldn't have it otherwise. I don't think you would either. How to have that happen and still have ways to say, okay, let's do this together. Let's meet it together. We can breathe. We can go through this. We can figure out what to do next. One of the things that I've been thinking about a lot is the role of effort in the middle part of the Eightfold Path. And I know that people have different lineages here, but everybody probably is familiar enough with the Eightfold Path of practice, with the three moral precepts of wise speech, wise action, and wise livelihood, beginning it, and wise understanding and wise aspiration, the wisdom parts, as the end of the Eightfold Path. But the three middle parts, wise effort, wise mindfulness, and wise concentration, seem to me both literally in the sense of that's where they're located in the path, but actually really, really the heart of the path. I think that those are the three internal mechanisms we have to really transform for me anyway, to get my balance back so that I can be helpful, so that I can maintain a connection. So I can maintain a connection and make some good plans. I think it's all about being able to see, whoa, I've been broadsided by life. There's a fire. What should I do? And then using some concentration methods. I say to myself, I've been telling this to people recently, and they've been enjoying it. I hope you do too. I get stuck in things. I get mad at something, or frightened by something, or disappointed by something. And then my mind starts to tell a story about how I'm going to get over being mad, or over being disappointed, or over being frightened. And it doesn't get me anywhere, that thinking business. It just winds me up tighter and tighter and tighter. And at some point, in all of that thinking and speculating, I really get it that past the story of the moment is the truth of the moment, which is that I'm in pain at that moment. And if I stop and I say to myself, sweetheart, you're in pain. Take a breath. Everything changes. And it's just really sitting down in the truth of my experience. I tell that to people. I say, you can say anything. If it doesn't work for you to say that, I actually do say to myself, sweetheart, you're in pain. And it's important for me to say that because it means I'm not mad at myself for having gotten myself into pain, for feeling the pain. There's not a mistake. that if I had been a better spiritual practitioner, it wouldn't have happened. It happened. And I'm just a human being. Sweetheart, you're in pain. Take a breath. Think about this. What do you want to do? I think about that as wise concentration. Take another breath. Take another breath. Think about wise mindfulness being the what do you want to do? This thing that's come up, this challenge. What are the possibilities? What's available? What can you do? What can you not do? And to do what you can do. And I think about wise effort really being the key to it, the awareness of, sweetheart, you're in pain. Do something else. Where you're going with this, hatching revenge, plotting this, plotting that, this is not a good way to go. Yeah, I hear a lot of people laugh. You know that someone does something. You're in a meeting. Someone says something. You don't like it. Well, I don't like it. Let's just own it. Okay, so I get in my car. I'm going home. I'm driving home. I'm thinking, she shouldn't have said that. That wasn't so nice. That's all right. I kept it together. Tomorrow, when I see that person, or next week, I'll just be a little cool to them. I won't say anything about it, but I'll be a little cool. And then they'll know, or they'll wonder, and then they'll say, is something the matter? And I'll say, no, nothing's the matter. Anybody ever did that here? The mind on its own is one moment away from hatching revenge when it's annoyed. And it's incredibly easy to get annoyed. And revenge does not feel good. It does, it feels like when you start, but actually when you think about it, you're not actually doing it, you're just thinking about it, and it just really pollutes the mind. And the ability to discover, this is the road the road to indignation does not end up any place good. You don't want to do that, Sylvia. You want to do something else. What else to do? Which is really what I think the Buddha was teaching in right effort. Sometimes it's presented as, make a big effort. But actually it's quite explicit about what right effort is. It has 4 parts. Did you know that? 4 parts of right effort are the effort to discern whether the mind state that's present is a wholesome one, or mind states that are present are wholesome. So if you feel compassion, kindness, generosity, peace, curiosity, those are wholesome mind states. So notice that there are wholesome mind states present, and keep them there, cultivate, enlarge them. The second part is notice if there aren't wholesome mind states there, and then cultivate them. There are ways to cultivate them, which we're going to talk about just in a minute. Notice if there are unwholesome mind states present, like revenge or any of the revenge, embitterment, plotting and planning. Notice if there are unwholesome mind states and put them out of your mind. So it's a wonderful, I love to read that instruction because it makes it sound like just do it. Like the Nike ad, just do it. But for the most part, it's problematic for people when they have an unwholesome mind state. You say, okay, I'm going to put that down. No, you're not. You're going to think about it a little more because it's so interesting to think about. But really, that decisiveness to say if there are unwholesome mind state presence, put them out. And if you notice the absence of unwholesome mind states, keep them out. So that's very clear about what to do. So I think it's actually a very, very important change of understanding, or I'd like to think maturing of understanding in my own years of practice. I erroneously understood. I'm sure that my teachers were teaching right. And my sense of learning mindfulness 30 years ago when I began was it was the ability to be with experience as it arose in a balanced way, not pushing it away, not denying it, not grasping onto it. I think that's still true. That's a good definition of mindfulness. What I didn't hear, and it certainly may have been there, is that I wasn't obligated to be completely passive in that experience. Like some mind state arrives, a mind state of anger, a mind state of disappointment, dismay, embitterment, whatever it was, that I wasn't really required to sit with it endlessly and notice it and notice it and notice it. It would of its own leave when it was finished. That I actually did learn, and I think it actually helped me in subsequent experiences over all these years, be with difficult times through that period of being there. So I think it was very important for me. I did not have the sense, which I am now more actively cultivating, that I could do something to really sweeten those mind states. If I find my mind enraged, I could do something to sweeten the mind at that point, to really say, this doesn't suit me, I'm going to do something else. One of the ways that I envision it is I could make the frame on my experience bigger. When someone does something, one of my acquaintances, one of my colleagues, one of my kin, whatever, does something that upsets me, I discover that my mind zeroes in on that thing like it's the whole identity of that person. That person is reduced to that one single action at that moment. How could they do that to me? And I've forgotten in that moment the 8 million other actions that they've done over the course of time, or the 8 million other things that are true about them, for everybody. When something about the world is so painful to me, this situation, this political situation, that world situation, and my whole mind is really knotted up about it, and I'm really suffering with it, I have forgotten that there's a way to say that's true, and there are also extraordinary things happening, and extraordinary people who want to make extraordinary differences in the world. Not that this should disappear, but it should be held in some sort of a balance with the whole truth of things, so that I am not paralyzed and unable to move. It's not at all to negate the consuming event of the moment, but to balance it in some sort of a perspective. So I'll tell you, oh dear, look at all the time. I wanted to tell you 2 Zihuatanejo stories, but maybe I get to tell you one. This is a Zihuatanejo story. I just got home from the 2nd January retreat in Zihuatanejo. Mark McClellan was there with me. Ari Klayman was there as well, this year and last year. So it's a yoga and Buddhism meditation retreat. And last year, on the day of the retreat, in which I had been teaching about the attempt, the move in the mind to make the frame of experience larger, so that the difficulty of the moment was held in some sort of balanced perspective. Said you could make a bigger screen around what's going on, a perspective. That very morning, the very day of the very morning that I introduced that as a practice, was the day in which, unusually, everyone on that retreat was silent. You know, at Spirit Rock, most of our retreats are in silence all the time. This particular yoga and meditation retreat, we have silence during our periods of practice, and we have lots of periods of the day when people go to the beach or sail or do other things. It's really quite a lovely experience. After that, people wonder about how important is form. But anyway, on this particular day was the one day in the week in which we had decided in advance that everyone was going to be on their own and keep silence. So everybody kept silence, but still, people went down to the beach and went swimming and did all the things that they were doing. And a woman named Susan was walking into the water, into the surf. But it didn't look like a particularly uncalm surf day. It's a very easy beach and very not frightening. Anyway, Susan was walking into the surf. She was knee-deep in not turbulent surf, when all of a sudden there was a huge wave, and it picked her up and knocked her down and broke her leg in 4 places. And when she hit the ground, she knew that she was in a big trouble. It was really painful. And here's a not talking day, and she's not with anybody. So she was very good about, when she told the story later, she says, here she is in the water, here comes more surf. She said, I sat up and I put my legs straight out in front of me down into the surf, And I let the waves come, and each time a wave came, it carried me, and I put my hands back, and I pulled myself back onto the shore that way. Let the waves carry me back, and then when they did, and I was back on the shore, I waved my arms, and I shouted, and people came, and the people came who knew her from the retreat, and people came who didn't know her, who were just on the beach. And everybody was so entirely solicitous. They picked her up, they carried her over to a lounge chair, somebody covered her with a towel, somebody ran and got ice out of the cold drink concession in a plastic bag to put on her ankle. Somebody else called 911, somebody else put a cloth on her head. Everybody was saying soothing things to her. Take a breath, you'll be all right, we're getting help, it'll be all right, you're going to be fine. And in the middle here is Susan apologizing. She said, I'm so sorry I upset everybody's silent day. To be silent, and everybody reassuring her, no, this is fine, you're going to be fine, this is perfect. And the 911 people come, and the topography of that place is such that the nearest road arrives 2 floors up from where this beach is built down to the beach. So the ambulance had to park up here, and the ambulance attendants had to come down stone winding staircases with a stretcher to put her on. Very carefully put her in the stretcher, tied her in tremendously carefully, like I imagine under any circumstances. But if you're going to carry someone up perpendicularly around a winding stone staircase, you're going to be really careful. So she's all tied in. And they carry her up to the ambulance, and I go up with her, along with one of the people on the retreat who was herself a physician. And we're sitting in the ambulance with Susan while they were waiting for the paramedics to finish their documentation so that they could go. And Susan looked over at me, and that would have been the morning that I had been talking about a bigger frame. So she looked at me and she said, this was the best first experience I've ever had of being rescued by paramedics. and we both laughed, And in the moment I said to her, I'm going to teach this tonight when I get back to the group. And I did teach it that night I said they're going to enjoy it, and I did teach it when I got back to the group, and they did enjoy it. And when I got to tell the story this year, when we're all back reconvened there again with Susan, and I got to tell it, I said I knew at the time, and she did too, that moment, which was okay, the moment in which we both laughed, that moment was just a little island in which she could relax for a moment and feel safe. She said later, in that moment, it was a little moment in which I could think, people are so kind. People will take care of you. People you don't even know will take care of you. All you have to do is ask for help. People will come. This too shall pass. The going to New York tomorrow, that's going to be really difficult. But I'll make it, and this will be over. She said, all that could happen because in that moment, my mind just relaxed because we said that to each other and we laughed. And truth to tell, it was a very long, hard flying back to New York with the leg so incapacitated because they couldn't set it and see what the nego. And until she got back, and until they moved from one hospital to another, they got a cast on her, 4 months in cast, and all of that. But she said, that moment was okay. And I think to myself, all we have is moments. We have to make moments okay. We can't make a whole life okay, but we can make moments okay. And you make a moment okay enough to be able to have clarity in it about really what's essentially true. People are good. People will help you. You just need to ask for help. It makes it possible for that wisdom to endure when the mind implodes again and when things get difficult again. I really wouldn't want for anybody to have that sort of learning experience. You want to go on a meditation retreat and have that sort of profound insight without breaking your ankle. But it's probably a good story to tell also because one way or another we're always breaking our ankle in one way or another. It's like the house always breaking out into a fire. just in that moment. So I think about that the most of maybe all of the three. Truth to tell, I think about right concentration, right mindfulness, and right effort not being separate from each other. I actually don't think of any of the path parts being separate from each other. I think it's one path, and the path is using whatever you've got at hand to sort of rebalance the mind so you can say what's really happening here and what's a wise thing to do and how can I connect. In the Susan story, I think the important thing is that connections of love happened. Oh, I will tell it out. No, it's almost... So I'll tell the other Ziwataneo story because Mark and Ari star in it, this next story, and they don't even know it. So we finished a week of teaching, and I had been teaching, as I always do, about what's true, and talk about Dharma as truth, and talk about the Four Noble Truths, and essentially that there is the habitual state of the mind falling into suffering, but there is the possibility of the end of suffering, and that's really the truth that we all share as a hope. We said yesterday at that conference that one thing that everybody says the same is everyone who undertakes a Buddhist path does it because they have the sense that this is a transformative path, that there is the possibility of deconditioning the habits of the mind that lead to suffering and cultivating the habits of mind that don't. And that's actually a change, and that something will happen. It's not to be a Buddhist, but to become a Buddha in a certain way, to really change that, to transform the habits of the mind. And I think we do it through continual connections that keep our mind awake and appreciative, curious, eager to get out of bed another day. I had taught a lot this last week, about metta practice, because I think among the right effort, wise effort techniques, metta practice, which is the really dedicated wish for well-being for oneself and other people, is really one of the most effective ways of transforming the mind. Saying, I don't want to go down this road, I want to go down another one. It's the most immediate way. It's a dedicated saying, instead of this, I'm going to do blessing. Instead of this unwholesome mind state, I will bless myself and all beings or other beings. The mind cannot bless and be plotting revenge at the same time. It can't do it. So it's really a wonderful practice. I've been talking a lot about the connecting with love as really a tremendous balancer of the mind. I'd also been talking about the three things that are true, that things are impermanent, that suffering arises when there is the inability to accept things as they are, and that everything is connected, that karma is true, that really everything in this whole created universe is interdependent on everything else. So I talk about those three truths, characteristics of experience. So we finished we finished the whole retreat. We stood in a circle, as we will quite soon hear, and recited in quite a dignified way the dedication of merit, wishing well for all beings. And after having made that really traditional and solemn ending of the retreat, somebody, I actually think it was Mark, but I'm not sure, put the CD of the Beatles CD. Was it your CD? Whose CD is it?
Jashoda's CD.
It's Jashoda's CD. But it's suddenly here's all these people. We've bowed to each other. We've shouted hallelujah. And suddenly here are the Beatles singing, All You Need Is Love. And one of the things that we do as a teaching cadre is we all do a kind of a group hug, like a huddle. And so here are Mark and Ari and myself and Jashoda and Brahmani, and we're all doing a huddle and a hug. And the music is playing All You Need Is Love. And it was one of you who said, you think that's true? Is that all we need? And it was a great moment because I said, yeah, I think so, actually. So we could say either that's the fourth of the three truths about experience, or it's the one truth about experience that actually subsumes all the others. It was a great way to end it, actually. I actually would like that CD, and we'll do it at Spirit Rock at the end of retreats. So I think so. I think to myself that the question that orients my practice these days, people say to me sometimes, how much time do you spend every day watching your breath? Not so much. Some. I sit every morning, I do. How much time do you spend doing formal metta blessings? Some, when I'm riding in my car, or when I'm sitting sometimes, when my plane starts to bounce around. I orient my attention, I think this is true, as much as I can, to can I, in this moment, am I capable of caring? I used to think, am I capable of loving? Loving is such a little bit overused word. I like to think, can I really, in this moment, is my warmest heart available? Could I befriend in this moment myself or somebody else? Could I console myself or somebody else? Could I appreciate myself or somebody else? Is my capacity for caring connection intact? Because I think that's what I need. I don't know whether it's what everybody, I think it's what everybody else needs, but it's what I need. Not to feel lonesome, not to feel isolated, not to feel that I'm doing this life alone. Feeling really connected, like all of us doing this life together, from one end to the other. And keeping it going because we have caring connections. So that's way past what I was supposed to talk. Do you want to ask questions? What do people normally do?
We can take 5 minutes or so for questions. So anyone with a question?
Yes.
When you say to just do it step,
Yeah.
isn't that kind of just go back to a kind of unknown, kind of like, gotta figure this out yourself in your own sort of private way?
No. I actually was thinking of that just do it. It's a little bit of a story. Remind me of your name? Lewis, thank you. It's a little bit of a story of the just do it. I have a few minutes, I'll tell you a little bit of a story. I don't have it with me, and I'm not sure I could do it all by heart. But the only piece of teaching literature that I take with myself when I travel or go anyplace is the Metta Sutta. I love it. It seems to me to have the whole of the Dharma in it, the Buddha's teaching on loving kindness. And it took me, in the beginning, the first time, so this is a long time ago, maybe 20 years ago when I first began to think about it, it seemed to me, Louis, to be a little bit glib on the just do it and with not instructions about how. Because it has about 12 lines about this is what should be done for those who are skilled in goodness and who know the path of peace. Then it goes on to tell about sila instructions, morality instructions. And then it says what you really should do, wishing in gladness and safety may all beings be at ease. And then it says all the different beings, large and small and far and near and born and not born. And then it has a very crucial line. It says omitting none. And that seems to me like the crucial line in the whole thing. Because for most of us, we're amiable. And most beings we would care right away about. Most beings, except for this one or other being in the whole world. I once told a friend of mine, said, do you have any beings that you're holding out of your heart? So I said, I have one being I can't reconcile so-and-so. Because of this, and this. And then after I had told my whole thing about this, and this, she said, if there's just one person standing between you and having a completely open heart, really, couldn't you do something about that? You think about it, the other person's going around having a life, and I am held captive by the one person. But the sutta says omitting none, and I don't want to be glib about it because it's very hard, because some people have hurt us and offended us terribly. And so for a long time I thought about it, and I said, this is what mystifies me about the sutta is it doesn't say how to do it. It just says just do it, like the Nike ad, just do it. But I have changed my mind about that over the last several years, really from reading the sutta over and over. I don't think it says just do it. I think it says those first 10 lines about leading a life that's completely awake to how is what I'm doing affecting other people, which provides not only tremendously awakened state of mind, but a very tranquil and relaxed heart and conscience, from which really you feel more relaxed and are more able to have the broadness of vision, not to say so-and-so didn't offend me, but to say these kind of things happen. And who knows why this person did what they did. And they have reasons way beyond what I could possibly understand. It's not to like everything, but to not hold anything in enmity. There's the line of another very famous loving kindness chant that begins, "May I be free of enmity and danger." I love that line because I think the legend has it that the Buddha taught metta to monks who were going out to sit by themselves in jungles, and that they were afraid of it. You know, it was scary to be in a jungle. It would be scary for me to be in a jungle by myself. And he taught it as really an amulet, that if you said that, you would be protected from all kinds of things that might befall you. And that may be actually the archaic meaning, the original traditional meaning of may I be free of enmity and the danger of that whatever came with enmity to do me some harm. I actually think of it as may I be free of enmity in me and the danger that it poses to my own happiness, which means that doesn't mean I have to like everybody. Certainly doesn't mean I have to like everybody, because I don't like everybody. Just may I not have enmity. May I not have enmity. May all beings near and far be well. And that actually is for my own benefit. I think it's actually the greatest refuge, the source of greatest consolation for myself, not to have enmity in my heart.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.